Welcome back to the Book Nook podcast, listener, where we like to dive deep into resources and pull out the most valuable insights for you as young parents.
That's right.
And today we are embarking on a deep dive into how to talk so little kids will listen. A survival guide to life with children ages 2 to 7 by Joanna Faber and Julie King.
Yes. This is a really fun one.
I'm excited to talk about this one.
Yeah,
I feel like this is one that a lot of our listeners could really benefit from.
for sure.
So this book is interesting because it's not just like some random person, who decided to write a parenting book.
Right.
Joanna Faber actually grew up immersed in this world of parenting advice because her mother was Adele Faber,
Oh, wow.
who co-authored the very well-known book, Parents Liberated Children.
Okay, yeah, I've heard of that one.
So she kind of grew up,
With this.
with this,
Yeah.
in the world of how to talk to kids. And then she also, with Julie King, has been leading parenting workshops for years. So they've seen these challenges firsthand.
That's so interesting.
Yeah, and it really comes through in the book
Yeah.
because all of the stories that they share are rooted in real-life situations.
I love that.
They obviously change names and identifying details for privacy, but it's not just like made-up hypothetical situations.
Right.
These are real moments that other parents and children have navigated.
I find that so helpful in these kinds of books.
Me too, because it just makes it so much more relatable.
Yes, exactly.
So, listener, our goal today is to pull out some really practical, actionable strategies that you can use right away to navigate those emotional ups and downs and the cooperation challenges that come with raising little ones
Yeah.
without feeling overwhelmed.
Yes.
We want you to walk away from this deep dive with those light bulb moments.
Absolutely.
So let's jump right into chapter 1,
Okay.
which is all about tools for handling emotions.
Love it.
And the chapter is actually titled, What's All the Fuss About Feelings?
Mm-hmm.
And they start right away with this core principle, which is when kids aren't feeling right, they can't behave right.
That's so true.
Now, this might seem obvious on the surface,
Right.
but think about it, listener. When your little one is in the middle of a meltdown,
Yeah.
what's your immediate reaction?
Oh my gosh. I just want them to stop.
Yeah, you just want it to stop.
Right.
They just stop crying, just stop screaming,
Yeah.
just do what I'm asking you to do.
Exactly.
But we're not really addressing what's bubbling underneath.
Totally.
And so they encourage you to put yourself in their shoes for a moment, listener.
Yeah.
Think about a time when you felt completely off. Maybe you were exhausted, you were feeling under the weather.
Mm-hmm.
How would you react if someone just dismissed your feelings with a comment or tried to force you to be cheerful?
Not well.
Not well.
Right.
Probably snap at them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So they make us really consider how similar reactions from us can shut our kids down emotionally.
Right.
And then it just makes it that much harder to connect with them and resolve the situation.
For sure.
So what's the solution?
Well, one of the most important things is this distinction they draw between feelings and behavior. Okay.
They say that all feelings can be accepted,
Um,
but some actions must be limited.
I like that.
So it means we can acknowledge and validate whatever our child is feeling, the sadness, the anger, the frustration.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's okay to hit their sibling or to throw toys across the room.
Right. It's about validating their inner experience
Exactly.
without condoning every outward expression.
Exactly.
And they share this really great story.
Okay.
It's called The Disappointing Sponge Creature.
Okay.
And it's about this little boy named Sam.
Uh-huh.
And he was hatching these sponge horses.
Ah.
And he was so excited about it.
Yeah.
And they ended up sticking together and it ruined his plan.
Yeah.
And he was so disappointed,
No.
genuinely heartbroken over this.
Ah.
And so many of us as parents, our immediate reaction would be like, oh, it's just a toy.
I just get a new one or whatever.
Yeah, or, tomorrow we'll get another one. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
But instead, the parent in the story responded with empathy and just said, boy, you sound so disappointed.
And how did that go?
And it was like the tears stopped and they were able to talk calmly about it.
That's incredible, just that little bit of validation.
Yeah, it's amazing.
That's powerful.
And so I think that's something that we can all really take away from this is just that acknowledging the feeling,
Mm-hmm.
even if it seems totally disproportionate to us.
Right, because their world is so small right now.
Yeah. It
Everything feels so big.
can be incredibly powerful in de-escalating a situation.
For sure.
They share another example that I think a lot of parents can relate to,
Okay.
which is about this little boy named Dan who wanted to knock down his brother's block tower.
Oh, yeah, classic.
And, again, that our first instinct as a parent is to be like, no, don't do that. That's wrong.
Right, you're going to make him upset.
Yeah, you can make your brother cry. Don't do that.
Don't destroy all his hard work.
But in the story, the parent actually took a moment to acknowledge Dan's strong feelings about his own creation.
Okay.
Because I'm sure he had just built something amazing too.
Yeah, of course.
So by doing that, the parent kind of opened up this space for him to move past that urge to destroy his brothers.
That's so interesting.
And I think if those feelings hadn't been acknowledged, it probably would have just escalated into a fight.
Probably.
So I think that's another really good takeaway. Just kind of like pause
Yeah.
before you react and really think about where they're coming from
Right.
and what they might be feeling in that moment.
Because we've all been there, right?
Yeah.
As adults, we know what it feels like to just be totally dismissed when we're having a hard time.
And we know it doesn't feel good.
Not at all.
So why are we doing it to these little tiny humans?
Right. It's like a double standard.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so the book points out that so often our default setting is to try and fix the feeling or tell them it shouldn't exist.
Yeah. Wait.
We automatically try to shield them from sadness.
Yeah.
We dismiss what we see as minor upsets.
Right.
And we definitely discourage anger
Oh, yeah.
because, as a society, we don't want to encourage negative emotions.
Right.
But they make a really interesting point, which is without having their feelings acknowledged first,
Yes.
they can't hear our explanations or attempts to guide them.
It goes in one ear and out the other.
Yeah, they're just too caught up in the intensity of what they're feeling.
Makes sense.
So they offer some really practical advice that you can use right away, listener.
Okay. I like it.
So first of all, resist that urge to immediately bombard a distressed child with questions.
Like, why did you do that?
Yeah, why did you do that? What were you thinking?
When they just spilled their milk all over the floor?
Yes, especially right in the heat of the moment.
Yeah.
It rarely leads to any insightful self-reflection from a toddler or a preschooler.
Definitely not.
And then similarly, comparisons like, look how nicely your sister's behaving.
Ah, that's the worst.
It almost always backfires.
Yeah.
And it can breed resentment rather than cooperation.
For sure.
And then lectures.
Don't even get me started on lectures.
That basically say they're as effective as talking to the furniture.
Yeah, they're not listening.
So what do we do instead?
So instead, they have a really interesting tool that I love.
Okay.
Which is they say, be mindful of using the word but.
Okay.
Because it can often negate everything you just said.
Oh, that's interesting.
So instead, try using the sentence starter. The problem is.
Okay.
So, for example, instead of saying, I know you're disappointed there are no more cookies,
Right.
but we can have fruit instead,
Yeah.
you could say, how disappointing to find an empty cookie box.
Uh-huh.
The problem is, it's too late to go shopping right now.
I like that.
You see the difference?
Yeah.
Because the
Good.
first one, you're minimizing the disappointment with the
Right.
but with the second one, you're acknowledging the feeling and then stating the reality of the situation.
Yeah. And you're kind of like problem solving together. And you're validating their feelings at the same time.
Yes.
I like that.
And they have another great example. So like with siblings, let's say,
Mm-hmm.
instead of saying, it can be frustrating when your little brother keeps touching your Lego creation,
Yeah.
but you need to be patient.
Right.
Try saying this.
Okay.
It can be irritating to have to deal with a baby when you're trying to build a spaceship.
Uh-huh.
The problem is babies don't understand about Legos.
Yeah.
So again, you're acknowledging the older child's frustration
Right.
without judgment.
I love that.
And then explaining the situation.
Now, I know some parents listening might be thinking,
Yeah.
well, if I acknowledge every single desire my child has,
Uh-huh.
won't that just lead to them being spoiled and expecting to get everything they want?
Right.
And the authors actually address this head on,
They do.
which I appreciate.
Yeah.
And they argue that acknowledging feelings, even the desire for a specific toy in a store, can actually help children accept that they can't always have everything they want.
Interesting.
So, for example, you can say, oh boy, that is a really cool fire truck.
Uh-huh.
You love those flashing lights.
Yeah.
And it's not like you're saying, okay, let's buy it.
Right.
You're just acknowledging that they like it.
And that feeling of wanting it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then they introduce this tool, which is a wish list.
Oh, that's a good idea.
So you can say something like, let's add that awesome dinosaur to your wish list.
I love that.
It's a way to acknowledge those strong desires without immediate gratification.
Right. So you're not just giving in every time,
Exactly.
but also not dismissing them.
Yes. And I think that's so important because it's teaching them
Yeah.
that it's okay to want things.
Yes.
It's okay to have desires,
Right.
but you can't always get what you want right away.
Exactly. It's a good lesson for all of us.
Yeah.
For sure.
Another really interesting thing that they talk about is using art to acknowledge feelings,
Oh, that's a good idea.
especially those that are hard for children to articulate.
Yeah, because sometimes they don't even know what they're feeling.
Right. They just know that they feel bad.
Exactly.
And they share this really powerful story about a child who was really struggling with going to school.
Mm-hmm.
And instead of getting into a power struggle with him,
Yeah.
the parent suggested drawing a picture of how bad school felt.
Okay.
And when the child initially refused, even that,
Oh, wow.
the parent picked up the paper and started dramatically scribbling and verbalizing feelings of frustration and anger in a playful way.
Oh, that's cool.
And that actually opened up the space for the child to then pick up a crayon
Yeah.
and express his own difficult emotions physically, and then eventually talk about what was
Mm.
bothering him.
Wow. So it's like you're modeling it for them.
Yeah.
In a way.
And I think that's so powerful because it's not always about like sitting down and having this like deep conversation.
Right.
Sometimes it's about finding other ways to connect.
Right. Like a different outlet.
Yeah. And then another thing they talk about is mashing the child's emotion with a little bit of dramatic flair.
Okay.
And I love this because it can be so effective.
Yeah.
So there's this story about a child who wished for 100 million billion more hours to play.
A very specific wish.
Very specific, yes.
Yeah.
And instead of saying, oh, it's time to clean up now,
Right.
the parent echoed that sentiment with similar playful exaggeration,
Oh, I love that.
which somehow helped the child transition more easily to putting away their blocks.
That's incredible.
And I think it's because you're showing them that you understand the magnitude of what they're feeling.
Right.
It might seem silly to us as adults.
Yeah.
But to them, it's a really big deal.
Everything's a big deal when you're that little.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They also have this tool of giving a wish in fantasy.
What is that?
So it's basically like acknowledging that they can't have what they want in reality, but giving them a magical solution. So there's this story about a child who was so frustrated by not being able to get a penny out of his car seat.
Oh.
And instead of just trying to reason with him logically,
Right.
the parent was like, oh, I wish there was a magic button on the dashboard that could just like, poof, get the penny out.
I love that.
And it completely diffused the situation.
So you're entering their world.
Yeah.
A little bit.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then finally, they talk about this tool that I think might be a little counterintuitive to some,
Okay.
which is the power of almost silent attention.
Interesting.
So sometimes the most helpful thing we can do as parents is just be present and listen
Mm-hmm.
and respond with empathetic sounds like ook or
Okay.
And often that's all the child needs to process their feelings without us jumping in to try and fix things or offer solutions.
So you're just like a sounding board.
Yeah,
We're
exactly.
just there to listen.
And they have this great story called The Sibling Squabbling Zen,
Okay.
where the parent was just offering those little quiet acknowledgments while their daughter was venting about a conflict with her brother.
Uh-huh.
And after a few minutes, the daughter was just like, okay, I'm going to go play now.
Wow.
And she had worked through her feelings on her own
That's amazing.
without any direct parental intervention.
Yeah.
So I think it's so easy for us to want to jump in and be like, well, he did this because of this, and you should do this.
Right. Give them all the answers.
Yeah, but sometimes they just need to process it themselves.
And they have the ability to do that.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then another great story they share is called Very Bad Day.
Okay.
And it shows how just a simple and a hug allowed a preschooler to finally verbalize his sadness about a difficult day with a friend.
Oh.
So sometimes less is more.
Yeah. Sometimes we just make things worse
We do.
when we try to get too involved.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So moving on to chapter 2.
Okay.
The focus shifts from just acknowledging and handling emotions to the more practical day-to-day challenge of engaging cooperation.
Right. Because we all have things that have to get done.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the title of the chapter is actually Feelings, Smealings, She Has to Brush Her Teeth,
I love that.
which I think just perfectly
Yeah.
captures
Yeah.
that reality that, like,
Right.
we can validate their feelings,
Mhm.
but ultimately some things just need to get done.
Yeah. She's got to brush her teeth,
Exactly.
whether she wants to or not.
And so the authors start this chapter by humorously highlighting a whole range of ineffective communication methods
Okay.
that I think many of us,
Yeah.
myself included,
Sure.
have likely resorted to at some point.
Oh, yeah. All the time.
Things like giving direct commands,
Hmm.
assigning blame,
Uh-huh.
using name calling,
Right.
issuing threats or warnings.
Yeah. Like if you don't do this, then this is going to happen.
Yes. And they rightly point out that these approaches rarely foster any sense of warmth or genuine cooperation.
Yeah, you just end up in a power struggle.
Exactly.
Yeah,
And it usually just leads to defensiveness and resentment.
for sure.
So the big question is, if we can't simply tell a young child what to do and expect enthusiastic compliance,
Hmm.
what other options do we have?
That is the question.
And this chapter dives into a whole set of creative and practical techniques to foster cooperation.
I'm excited to hear about this.
So one of the first things they talk about
Okay.
is bringing inanimate objects to life and having them do the talking.
Oh, that's fun.
So think about it.
Okay.
You could have a lonely pair of shoes that shiver and complain about being left all by themselves,
Oh,
or a hungry toy basket that gobbles up stray blocks with gusto,
cute.
or a toothbrush that speaks in this demanding little voice, eager to fight those sugar bugs.
I love that.
These playful approaches can really bring a smile to a child's face
Totally.
and transform those mundane tasks into something more engaging.
Yeah, because it's not you nagging them anymore.
Exactly.
It's the toothbrush.
Yes.
I love that.
And it works because it taps into their wonderful imaginations.
Right.
And it makes the request feel less like a direct order from you.
Right. Like it's not personal.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Another really powerful strategy is turning everyday requests into games.
Oh, fun.
So instead of just saying, put on your pajamas now,
Yeah.
try asking, can you put on your pajamas faster than a speeding train?
Love it.
Or can you get dressed with your eyes closed? Leaving a friend's house can become a mission to avoid imaginary lava or sneaky alligators.
That's so fun.
Even just challenging a group of energetic preschoolers to freeze like statues
Yeah.
can be far more effective than simply telling them to be quiet.
Yeah, they love that.
And one of my favorite examples is calling a single raisin an energy pill
That's cute.
to motivate a group of children.
Yeah, why not?
And there's this really funny story in the book called Mrs. Meanie,
Okay.
where they actually created this slightly grumpy, made-up character
Uh-huh.
who managed to make the usually tedious task of getting dressed in the morning an enjoyable game for this little girl.
Wow, so you're like basically using reverse psychology
Yeah,
in a way.
yeah, that's fun. And then there's another great story called Fly Away Home,
Okay.
where they pretend to be different flying insects like dragonflies, butterflies, ladybugs.
Oh.
And it transformed this often stressful transition from the car into school
Yeah.
for these twins.
I like that.
So it's all about injecting a bit of playfulness
Mm-hmm.
into those moments that can be points of friction.
For sure.
Another helpful strategy is to shift away from asking those accusatory why questions.
Like, why did you do that?
Yeah, or why did you leave that there?
Right.
And instead, just provide information.
Oh, okay.
So, for example, instead of saying in an irritated tone, why did you leave the cheese on the chair?
Uh-huh.
You could just say calmly, the cheese is in reach of the dog.
Oh.
And that gives the child the necessary information to understand why the cheese shouldn't be there without making them feel blamed or defensive.
Like you're not attacking their character.
Exactly.
You're just stating a fact.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then they have this great story called Airmail, where they just simply stated where something belonged.
Uh-huh.
Benny, the mail belongs on the desk.
Right.
And it was so much more effective than a drawn-out reprimand.
Yeah, sometimes simple is better.
It is.
Yeah.
And then they talk about the power of saying what you need with just a single word
Okay.
or even a gesture.
Mm-hmm.
Because as we talked about earlier, young children often tune out lengthy explanations.
Oh, they definitely do.
So a simple point towards the cupboard while saying the word milk
Yeah.
can be far more effective than a whole lecture about keeping the kitchen tidy.
It's like they have a short attention span.
And they do.
Yeah.
Similarly, holding up a dirty diaper and saying compost with a pointed look
Yeah.
can prompt the desired action without any argument.
Love it.
Building on that idea of being concise,
Okay.
describing what you see can also be a powerful tool.
So instead of like you left this out again,
Right.
you just say, I see the milk sitting on the counter.
Exactly.
Okay.
And it's less confrontational. And it encourages a sense of responsibility.
Gotcha.
And then there's the incredibly valuable technique of using I statements
Okay.
to describe how you feel while consciously avoiding that accusatory you language.
Oh, that's a good tip.
So they share this really touching example
Okay.
of this father who said, I get frustrated when I have to iron while you're watching TV.
Uh-huh.
And it led to his son offering to watch him iron.
Wow.
It's amazing how that shift in language can open up communication.
That's like you're being vulnerable with them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then there's this other story called The No Fear Mountaineer.
Okay.
which illustrates how expressing your own feelings,
Mm-hmm.
like when I see one child hurting another child, I get very upset,
Yeah.
can actually stop unwanted behavior without resorting to yelling or anger.
Right, because you're not saying you're a bad kid.
Exactly.
You're saying this is how this action makes me feel.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then finally, they talk about the power of writing a note,
Oh, that's cute.
and it
Yeah.
can transform a potentially dreaded task
Yeah.
into a fun interaction.
Okay.
So they have this example of the invitation to bathe,
Uh-huh.
where they created a written appointment card for bath time
Oh, I love that.
with all these appealing options listed.
So they feel like they have a choice.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And the routine became something that the children look forward to rather than resisted.
That's great.
So it's all about finding ways to reframe the request in a playful and unexpected way.
Yeah, making it fun.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So listener, as we begin to wrap up our deep dive into these first couple chapters of How to Talk, so little kids will listen,
Yeah.
you now have this fantastic set of practical strategies to consider.
Right.
From really tuning into those big feelings with empathy,
Mm-hmm.
even a little bit of playful drama,
Yeah.
to using imaginative games, giving a voice to inanimate objects,
Uh-huh.
providing clear and simple information,
Right.
using single words and gestures effectively,
Yeah.
describing what you observe, expressing your own feelings with I statements, and even leaving those little notes.
It's a whole new world.
It is.
Yeah.
It's all about finding ways to connect and communicate with your little ones
Mm-hmm.
that foster understanding and cooperation,
I love that.
and hopefully make those everyday moments of potential friction a little bit smoother.
For sure, because parenting is hard enough as it is.
It is.
Yeah.
So if you enjoyed these insights and you're eager to delve even deeper into other topics covered in the book,
Yeah.
like effective alternatives to punishment,
Mm.
the nuances of using praise and appreciation in a meaningful way,
Mm-hmm.
practical strategies for navigating sibling rivalry,
Oh, yeah.
and even specific approaches for addressing the unique needs of differently wired children.
Important stuff.
Yes, we wholeheartedly invite you to read the book in its entirety for even more in-depth guidance and support.
Yeah, it's definitely worth checking out.
And we'll be back next week for another deep dive.
Sounds good.
Until then, happy parenting, listener.
See you next time.